I knew exactly how it was going to end the moment I sent that message. Hey, you still down for that trip? Just us. Couple days. Get out of the city. I stared at the screen for a full minute after hitting send, my thumb hovering like I could somehow take it back. But I didn't, because the truth is, I didn't want to take it back. I wanted this, and I knew what I was doing. Benjamin replied faster than I expected. Yeah, I need it. When are we going? I exhaled slowly, leaning back in my chair, staring at the ceiling like it might judge me. Because if anyone knew what this trip really was, yeah, it would sound bad. Or maybe just obvious. Benjamin and I had been friends for about 3 years. Not best friends, not the kind who text every day, but close enough. We worked in the same office, different departments, same floor, and somehow just clicked. He was easy to be around. Too easy. That was the problem. Because somewhere along the way, it stopped being just casual. At least for me. And I'm pretty sure, not just for me. There were moments. Always moments. The kind you could brush off if you wanted to stay safe. Like the time we stayed late at work, both pretending we had deadlines. The office was empty, lights dimmed, just the hum of computers and the city glowing outside the windows. He had leaned over my shoulder to look at something on my screen, closer than necessary. Way closer. I could feel his breath near my neck, steady, warm. Neither of us moved. Not for a few seconds too long. Looks good, he had said eventually, but his voice sounded off, lower, and when I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch his expression. Yeah, that wasn't nothing, but we both stepped back. Always. That's how it had been for months. Constant almost. A quiet tension neither of us wanted to name, because naming it would change everything. And I think, deep down, we both knew it wouldn't go back after that. So instead, we stayed in this weird, comfortable limbo, until I got tired of it. That's where the trip came in. I told myself it was just a break. Fresh air, no work, no distractions. But that was bullshit. I picked that place on purpose. A small cabin, 2 hours outside the city. Middle of nowhere, surrounded by forest, no signal half the time. I'd found it months ago while scrolling through listings late at night, unable to sleep. I didn't book it then, but I remembered it. 1 bedroom, 1 bed. At the time, it felt like a stupid thought I'd never act on. Turns out I was wrong. We left early Saturday morning. Benjamin showed up at my place with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, wearing a hoodie and jeans like it was just another casual weekend. But there was something about the way he looked at me when I opened the door. A pause, a quick scan, like he was checking something. Ready? He asked. Yeah, I said, grabbing my keys. Simple. Normal. Except it didn't feel normal. The drive started easy enough. Music playing, light conversation, the usual catching up. He talked about work, about how burnout he felt, about needing to get away for a bit. I listened, nodding, but part of my brain was somewhere else entirely. Because every time I glanced over at him, his hand resting on his thigh, the way his hoodie pulled slightly when he stretched, the way he kept shifting in his seat like he couldn't fully relax. Yeah. I noticed everything, and I had a feeling he did too. At one point, about an hour in, the conversation dipped into silence. Not awkward, just quiet, the kind where you're both aware of it. Benjamin turned his head slightly, looking out the window, then back at me. You picked this place randomly? He asked. There it was. The question. I kept my eyes on the road. Pretty much. A lie. He hummed softly like he didn't fully buy it, but didn't push. Looks remote, he added. It is. Another pause. Then quieter. Just us, huh? I glanced at him then. Briefly. Yeah. That okay? He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary. Yeah, he said, but something in his expression shifted. Not hesitation. Something else. Something expectant. And that's when I knew. I wasn't the only one who understood what this trip really was. We got there around noon. The cabin looked exactly like the pictures. Small, clean, surrounded by trees that made everything feel quieter the second you stepped out of the car. Benjamin took a slow look around, stretching his arms slightly. Damn, he said. You weren't kidding about remote. Yeah, I replied, grabbing my bag. We walked inside, and the moment the door closed behind us, something changed. It was subtle, but it was there. The silence felt heavier, closer. Benjamin stepped further in, looking around the space, then toward the bedroom. I watched him notice it. The bed. Just one. He didn't say anything right away. Just stood there for a second, hands on his hips, processing. Then he let out a quiet breath. Guess we're really disconnecting, huh? He said, half smiling. I leaned against the door, watching him. Something like that. He turned to look at me, and there it was again. That look. No distractions. No office. No excuses. Just us. For a moment, neither of us moved. And I could feel it building already, that same tension, but stronger now. Sharper. Like there was nothing left to hide behind. Benjamin took a step toward me. Slow. Not enough to be obvious. But enough. You ever feel like... He started. Then stopped himself, shaking his head slightly. Never mind. I didn't move. Like what? He hesitated. Then looked straight at me. Like we've been pretending not to notice something? My chest tightened. There it was. No more almost. I pushed off the door, stepping closer to him. Yeah, I said quietly. I think we have. The air between us felt different now. Thicker. Benjamin didn't move away. That was the first thing I noticed. Because up until now, that's what always happened. One of us would shift, make a joke, grab a drink, anything to break whatever was building between us. But not this time. This time, he just stood there, close enough that I could see the slight tension in his jaw, the way his chest rose a little slower than usual. Say it, I said quietly. His eyes flicked down for a second, then back up to mine. You knew, he said, not a question. I didn't answer right away, because yeah, I did. I had a feeling, I admitted. He let out a short breath, almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. Of course you did. There was something in his tone, half nervous, half relieved, like he'd been holding that in longer than I thought. Silence settled between us again, but it wasn't the same kind as before. It wasn't uncertain anymore. It was loaded. Benjamin ran a hand through his hair, pacing a step away from me, then back again, like he didn't know what to do with himself. This is kinda messed up, right? He said, glancing at me. Why? He gestured vaguely between us. Because we've been, whatever this is, for months. And now we're just standing here acting like it's normal to finally say it out loud. I shrugged slightly. Feels more honest than what we were doing before. He looked at me for a second, studying my face like he was trying to figure out if I was serious. You planned this, he said again, quieter this time. I didn't deny it. His lips pressed together, but instead of pulling away, he stepped closer again. Even closer than before. You booked a place, he continued. Middle of nowhere, one bed. His voice trailed off. Yeah, I said. Another pause. Then, almost under his breath. So what exactly were you expecting to happen? That question hit differently. Because I could lie. I could downplay it, pretend I didn't think this far ahead. But what was the point now? I think you know, I said. His eyes darkened slightly at that. Not in a bad way. Just focused. Say it, he said. I let out a slow breath. I wanted this to stop being almost. That landed. I could see it in the way his expression shifted, like something clicked into place. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then Benjamin stepped forward again. Close enough now that there was barely any space left between us. You're really direct when you want to be, he murmured. Only when I'm tired of waiting. That got a reaction. A small one, but I caught it, the way his lips twitched, the way his shoulders relaxed just a fraction. Yeah, he said quietly. Me too. And that was it. That was the moment everything changed. Because after that, neither of us had an excuse left. I don't remember who moved first. I just remember the shift. 1 second we were standing there, talking like we had all the time in the world. And the next, the distance between us disappeared. It wasn't rushed. That's what surprised me. I thought it would be messy, impulsive, like all that tension finally snapping at once. But it wasn't. It was slow, careful, like we were both making sure this was real. My hand brushed his arm first, barely there, testing. He didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers caught my wrist lightly, holding it in place for a second. Not stopping me, just acknowledging it. My heart was beating way faster than I wanted to admit, but I kept my expression steady. "You good?" I asked. He nodded, eyes locked on mine. "Yeah," he said. Then, after a beat, "You?" "Yeah." Another second passed. Then his grip on my wrist tightened just slightly, not enough to hurt, just enough to guide my hand. Closer, until my fingers brushed against his chest. Through the thin fabric of his hoodie, I could feel the tension there too. His breath hitched. Subtle, but I noticed. Of course I noticed. "Still think this is a bad idea?" I asked quietly. He let out a slow exhale, his gaze dropping to where my hand rested against him. Then back up. "No," he said, and this time there was no hesitation. The first kiss wasn't dramatic. No sudden pull, no aggressive move. It was almost hesitant, like we both needed that final confirmation. His hand slid from my wrist up to my shoulder, resting there for a second, fingers pressing just slightly. Then he leaned in, slow enough that I could have stopped him. I didn't. Our lips barely touched at first. Just a brush, testing. But the second it happened, yeah, there was no going back. Because everything we'd been ignoring for months hit all at once. I felt it in the way he exhaled against me, in the way his hand tightened on my shoulder, pulling me just a little closer. And when I leaned in properly this time, that's when it changed. The hesitation dropped. The kiss deepened, not rushed, but more certain. Like we'd crossed the line and neither of us was pretending anymore. My hand slid up from his chest, catching the edge of his hoodie, gripping it lightly. He responded instantly, his other hand coming up to my side, fingers pressing into my shirt like he needed to ground himself. We broke apart for a second, both breathing a little heavier. He looked at me, something different in his eyes now. Not confusion, not uncertainty, something steadier. "You really knew this would happen," he said, voice low. I smirked slightly, still catching my breath. "I was hoping." He shook his head, but there was a small smile there now. "Yeah," he murmured. "Me too." And then he pulled me back in. This time there was nothing careful about it. This time there was nothing uncertain about it. Not rushed, just real. Benjamin's hand slid up to the back of my neck, pulling me in closer, not forceful. Just enough to make it clear he wasn't second-guessing this anymore. And neither was I. There was something different now. The tension we'd been carrying for months wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't that electric, anxious edge. It settled, turned into something warmer, heavier, safer. We broke apart again, but this time neither of us stepped back. Our foreheads almost touched, both of us just standing there, breathing the same air, like we needed a second to catch up with what just happened. Benjamin let out a quiet laugh under his breath. "Okay," he said. "So, this is real." "Yeah," I replied. He looked at me for a moment, really looked this time, like he wasn't trying to hide it anymore. "I kept thinking I was imagining it," he admitted. "All those moments, I thought maybe I was just reading into things." "You weren't." "I know that now," he said, a small smile forming. "Kinda wish I figured it out sooner." I shrugged slightly. "We got here anyway." "Yeah," he repeated quietly. There was a pause, but it wasn't awkward. Felt grounded. Then he stepped back just enough to run a hand through his hair, exhaling like he was finally letting something go. "You have no idea how long I've been trying not to mess this up," he said. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms loosely. "Mess what up?" "This," he gestured between us. "Whatever we had before." I didn't want to say something and ruin it. I let that sit for a second. "Funny," I said. "I thought the same thing." He glanced at me, then laughed a little, shaking his head. "Seriously?" "Yeah." Another pause. Then softer. "So we've just been..." "What?" Circling each other for months? Pretty much. Benjamin looked down, then back up again, something thoughtful in his expression. That's kinda insane. Or predictable. Maybe both, he said. We ended up sitting on the edge of the bed after that. Not because we planned to. It just happened. Like everything else today. Benjamin leaned back slightly, resting his hands behind him, staring up at the ceiling for a moment. This place is quiet, he said. Too quiet. He shook his head. No, I like it. Then, after a second, feels like there's nothing to hide behind out here. That was exactly it. No work. No distractions. No excuses. Just honesty. I sat next to him, close enough that our shoulders brushed lightly. He didn't move away. Do you regret it? I asked. He turned his head toward me immediately. No. No hesitation. Then his expression softened slightly. Do you? I shook my head. Not even a little. That seemed to settle something in him. He nodded once like he needed to hear that out loud. Good, he said quietly. The rest of the afternoon felt different. Not intense. Not overwhelming. Just easy. We unpacked, made coffee, stepped outside for a bit. The forest around the cabin was calm. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel empty, it just feels still. At one point, we ended up walking a short trail behind the cabin. Benjamin was talking about random stuff again, work stories. Dumb office drama, but now there was something lighter in his tone. Like he wasn't holding himself back anymore. And every now and then, our hands would brush as we walked. Small. Accidental. But neither of us moved away. At one point, I just let my hands stay there for a second longer. He noticed. Of course he did. He didn't say anything, just adjusted slightly so our fingers actually lined up. Not fully holding hands. Just close enough. And for some reason, that felt bigger than anything else so far. By the time we got back to the cabin, the sun was starting to drop. Golden light through the trees. Everything quieter than before. Benjamin stood by the door for a second before going inside, turning to look at me. You really picked this place on purpose, didn't you? He said again. I smirked. You're still stuck on that? Yeah, he admitted. Because now I know why. I stepped closer. And he held my gaze, a small, knowing smile forming. Next time, he said, just tell me. I raised an eyebrow. You would have said yes? He didn't even hesitate. Yeah. That hit harder than I expected. Good to know, I said quietly. Inside, the cabin felt even smaller now. Not in a bad way, just closer. Benjamin dropped onto the bed again, stretching slightly, then looking over at me. So, he said, what now? Simple question, but it carried weight. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him. Now, I said, we stop pretending. He smiled at that. Yeah, he said softly. I think I'd like that. And for the first time since this started, there was no tension left. Just something real. That night felt different the second the sun went down. Not dramatic. Not like something out of a movie. Just quieter. The kind of quiet that makes you notice everything. The creak of the cabin wood. The soft hum of the wind outside. The way the light from the single lamp stretched shadows across the walls. Benjamin was in the kitchen area, pouring himself another drink, while I leaned against the counter pretending I wasn't watching him. But I was. Of course I was. Because now I didn't have to pretend I wasn't noticing things anymore. Beer? He asked, holding one up. Yeah. He handed it to me, our fingers brushing for a second. This time, neither of us pulled away quickly. He lingered just a little longer, then let go. Small things like that suddenly felt louder. We moved around each other easily after that, making something simple to eat, talking about nothing important. But under all of it, there was this quiet awareness. Like both of us knew the night wasn't over. Not really. Later, we ended up sitting on the couch. It wasn't big. Just enough space for two people if you didn't mind being close. We didn't seem to mind. Benjamin stretched his arm along the back of it, casual but not accidental. I sat just close enough that my shoulder brushed against his side. For a while, we just watched something random on TV, neither of us really paying attention. Then, at some point, the conversation faded again, and the silence came back. But now it felt different than earlier. Heavier. Not uncomfortable. Just expectant. Benjamin shifted slightly, turning his head toward me. "You're thinking about it again," he said. I glanced at him. "About what?" "This," he said quietly. "Us." I didn't answer right away, because he wasn't wrong. "Yeah," I admitted. He studied my face for a second, like he was trying to read something deeper. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I exhaled slowly, setting my drink down on the table. That I don't want this to just be a weekend thing. That was the truth. And saying it out loud made it real in a way that caught even me off guard. Benjamin didn't respond immediately. His eyes dropped for a second, then came back to mine. "Good," he said. Simple, but it carried weight. "Because I don't either." Something in my chest eased at that. Not dramatically, just enough. He shifted closer after that. Not suddenly, just naturally. His arm slid from the back of the couch to rest behind me, his hand settling lightly against my side. I felt it immediately. The warmth, the intention. "Still overthinking?" he asked, voice low. "A little." He smirked slightly. "You always do. Only when it matters." That made his expression soften. "Then don't," he said quietly. I looked at him. "Just stay here," he added. "With me. Don't think past that." It sounded simple. Too simple. But right then, it made sense. So I nodded. "Okay." We didn't rush anything after that. That was the thing about this whole night. It wasn't about finally crossing a line anymore. That had already happened. Now it was about staying there, getting used to it. Benjamin's hand moved slightly against my side, fingers tracing absent patterns through the fabric of my shirt. Nothing intense, just grounding. I leaned back into him a little more without thinking. He noticed. His hand tightened just slightly in response. Not to pull me in, just to keep me there. "You're comfortable," he murmured. "Yeah," I said. "You trust me?" The question was quiet, serious in a way the rest of the night hadn't been. I turned my head to look at him. "Yeah," I said again, and I meant it. He held my gaze for a second longer, like he needed to be sure. Then he nodded. "Good." At some point, we ended up back near the bed. I don't even remember exactly how. One minute we were on the couch. The next, we were standing in that same space from earlier. Except now, everything felt calmer, clearer. Benjamin looked at the bed, then back at me, a faint smile on his lips. "Well," he said, "no more pretending, right?" I huffed a quiet laugh. "Guess not." He stepped closer. Slow. Deliberate. "Then stay," he said. It wasn't a question. And for the first time all day, I didn't hesitate at all. "I'm not going anywhere." We lay down without overthinking it. No awkwardness. No tension like before. Just two people who had finally stopped holding back. The space between us disappeared naturally, like it was always supposed to. Benjamin turned slightly toward me, his arms settling around me again, pulling me just enough closer. Not rushed, not intense, just right. "You know this changes things," he said quietly. "I know. You okay with that?" I looked at him. "Yeah," I said. "Are you?" He didn't even pause. "Yeah." The cabin went quiet again after that. Darker. Still. But this time, it didn't feel empty. I could feel him next to me, steady, real. And for once, my mind wasn't racing ahead. It wasn't overthinking every little detail. It just stopped. Because this was enough. For now. I woke up before him. I don't know what time it was exactly, early enough that the light coming through the window was still soft, barely cutting through the room. For a second, I didn't move. Just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out why everything felt different. Then I felt it. The weight of his arm around me. Benjamin was still asleep, close, steady, like sometime during the night he'd shifted even closer without either of us noticing. And just like that, everything from yesterday came rushing back. The drive, the cabin, that moment by the door. The way everything finally stopped being unspoken. I exhaled slowly, careful not to wake him. This was the part one hadn't really planned for. Not the night. The morning after. Because nights are easy. You can get caught up in the moment, let things happen, not think too far ahead. Mornings are different. They're quieter, clearer, more honest. And I didn't know if that would change anything. Benjamin stirred slightly beside me, his hand shifting just a little against my side. Then he went still again, still asleep. I turned my head slightly to look at him. Up close like this, it felt different than all the times I'd seen him before. Less distant, more real. His hair was a mess. His expression relaxed in a way I'd never seen at work or anywhere else. For a second, I just watched him. Then he frowned slightly like he could feel it. His eyes opened slowly. And for a brief moment, there was confusion there. Like he didn't immediately recognize where he was. Or who he was with. My chest tightened just a little. But then, clicked. I saw it happen. The shift. The memory catching up. And instead of pulling away, he just looked at me. Really looked. "Hey," he said, voice rough from sleep. "Hey." There was a pause. Not awkward. Just quiet. Then he let out a slow breath, his hand adjusting slightly where it rested against me. "So, that wasn't a dream," he murmured. I huffed a quiet laugh. "Nope." He closed his eyes for a second, like he was processing it, then opened them again. "Good," he said. Simple. But it hit. Neither of us rushed to move. That was the thing. I half expected one of us to pull away, create some space, pretend we needed coffee or something to break the moment. But we didn't. We just stayed there. Benjamin shifted slightly onto his side, facing me more directly now. Close. Close enough that I could see every little change in his expression. "You okay?" he asked. It wasn't casual. There was something real behind it. I nodded. "Yeah." "You sure?" "Yeah," I repeated. "You?" He studied me for a second longer, then nodded slowly. "Yeah." Another pause. Then quieter. "I thought this would feel more complicated." I raised an eyebrow. "And?" He shrugged slightly. "It doesn't." That was exactly it. It should have felt heavier, more confusing. But it didn't. It just felt right. Eventually, he pulled his arm back just enough to stretch, sitting up slightly against the headboard. I followed a second later, the space between us opening just a little. Not far. Just enough. Benjamin ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. "Okay," he said. "We should probably talk about this like actual adults." I smirked. "Probably." He glanced at me. "Don't look so amused." "I'm not. I just didn't think you'd be the one to say that." "Yeah, well," he muttered. "Someone has to." But there was no tension in it. If anything, it felt easy. He leaned back slightly, looking at me again. "So," he said, "what does this mean?" That question. I knew it was coming. I just didn't know how to answer it. "Depends," I said. "What do you want it to mean?" He didn't respond right away. His gaze dropped for a second, then came back. "I don't want to go back to how it was," he said. Honest. Straightforward. No hesitation. "Me neither," I said. That part was easy. The harder part was everything after that. "Work's gonna be," he started, then stopped. "Complicated." "Yeah." I nodded. "Probably." He let out a breath. "But I don't really care about that right now," he added. That caught my attention. "No?" He shook his head. "No. I care about whether this he gestured between us is actually something." I held his gaze. "It is," I said, and I meant it. Something in his expression softened again. Not relief exactly, just certainty. "Okay," he said quietly. Then, after a second, "Good." We sat there for a moment, neither of us rushing to fill the silence. Then Benjamin glanced toward the window, the light a little stronger now. "Guess we're not going back to sleep," he said. "Probably not." He smirked slightly. "Coffee?" "Yeah." But neither of us moved right away. Because even as simple as that moment was, It still felt like something had shifted. Not just between us. Inside it. And I had a feeling. This trip wasn't going to be as simple as I originally thought. Not anymore. The tension didn't hit immediately. That's the thing about mornings like that, it's easy to pretend everything is simple when you're still inside the bubble. Coffee. Quiet conversation. Sunlight through the windows. Normal. Too normal. Benjamin was leaning against the counter, sipping his coffee, scrolling through his phone while I stood by the window, staring out at the trees like I was trying to memorize the moment. Everything felt calm. Until it didn't. "Hey!" he said suddenly. I turned. "Yeah." He hesitated for a second, then tilted his phone slightly. "You didn't tell me about him." My stomach dropped. "That fast?" "What are you talking about?" I asked, even though I already had a feeling. Benjamin's expression shifted, still controlled, but tighter now. "This guy," he said, turning the screen toward me. I stepped closer, and yeah, I recognized the name immediately. Daniel. A message thread. Nothing recent, but recent enough. Benjamin watched my face carefully. "You forgot to mention you were seeing someone?" he asked. His tone wasn't aggressive. That somehow made it worse. "I wasn't," I said. "Weren't?" he repeated, raising an eyebrow slightly. "It wasn't serious," I added. "It's over." "When?" I hesitated. And that was enough. Benjamin let out a quiet breath, looking away for a second, then back at me. "Robert." "It's done," I said more firmly. "Before this." He studied me, not angry, just measuring. "Before this trip?" he asked. "Yeah." Another pause. "Before you invited me?" That one landed. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, the timing wasn't clean, and he could see that. Benjamin set his coffee down slowly, his jaw tightening just slightly. "Okay," he said, but it didn't sound okay. "I didn't lie to you," I said. "You didn't tell me either. I didn't think it mattered." He let out a short laugh, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah," he said. "It matters." The air shifted. That easy, calm feeling from earlier, gone. Replaced with something heavier. More real. "I wasn't with him," I said. "Not like that." Benjamin looked at me. "Then what was it?" I exhaled, trying to find the right words. "Something that wasn't going anywhere." "And this is?" he asked. That hit harder than I expected. "Yeah," I said. "It is." No hesitation. I meant it. But that didn't fix the look on his face. He turned away slightly, walking a few steps toward the window now, mirroring exactly where I had been standing earlier. He started, then stopped. "What?" I asked. He shook his head once, like he was trying to reset. "I don't want to be another it's not serious thing," he said quietly. That was it. That was the real issue. Not Daniel. Not timing. Him. "I wouldn't have brought you here if you were," I said. He turned back to me. "Then why didn't you tell me?" he asked. I held his gaze. "Because I knew this would happen," I said. He frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means—" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I didn't want anything getting in the way of this before it even started." His expression shifted again. Not softer, but more focused. "So you just ignored it?" he asked. "I ended it." "When?" There it was again. That question. And this time I answered. "A few days before the trip." Silence. Benjamin nodded slowly, processing that. "Okay," he said. But again, it didn't feel resolved. We stood there for a second, neither of us moving. Then he crossed his arms slightly, leaning back against the wall. "You get how that looks, right?" he said. "Yeah. You plan a trip, don't mention anything, and then suddenly it's all," he gestured between us, "this." "I didn't fake anything," I said. "I'm not saying you did. But you think I might have." He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I stepped closer. "Look at me," I said. He did. Reluctantly, but he did. "I wanted this," I said. "Not that. This." I didn't look away, didn't soften it. because there was no point pretending now. Benjamin held my gaze for a long second, then exhaled slowly. I know, he said, but there was still something there. Something unsettled. I just don't like feeling like I walked into something halfway, he added. You didn't. Feels like I did. That stung more than I expected. Because I got it. From his perspective. Yeah. It looked messy. Then don't, I said. He frowned. Don't what? Don't treat it like that. And what should I treat it like? I didn't hesitate. Like the thing we've both been avoiding for months. That landed. Hard. Benjamin looked at me, really looked this time. Like he was weighing everything at once the past few months, yesterday, this morning. All of it. Then he ran a hand over his face, exhaling. You make this sound simple, he said. It is simple. No, he said, shaking his head slightly. It's not. I stepped even closer. It can be. That quiet again. But now it wasn't calm. It was tension. Different from before. Sharper. Real. After a few seconds, Benjamin looked away again, his voice quieter now. I don't want to get this wrong, he said. That was the truth underneath everything. Not anger. Not jealousy. Fear. I know, I said. And I don't want to be just timing. You're not. He looked at me again. Then prove it. That wasn't a challenge. Not really. It was something else. Something more honest than anything he'd said so far. And for the first time since this conversation started, I didn't answer right away, because I knew this wasn't something I could just say. I didn't answer him, not because I didn't want to, because I knew he was right. This wasn't something I could fix with the right words or a confident tone. He wasn't asking for reassurance, he was asking for something real. Then prove it. The words stayed there between us, heavier than anything else we'd said so far. Benjamin didn't move, didn't look away this time either. He was waiting, and for once, I didn't try to talk my way out of it. Instead, I stepped back. Just one step. His expression shifted slightly, confusion, maybe even a hint of disappointment, but he didn't say anything. I grabbed my keys from the table. I'll be back, I said. That got a reaction. What? He frowned. Robert, what? But I was already heading for the door. Not dramatic. Not angry. Just certain. Give me a bit, I added before stepping outside. And then I was gone. The cold air hit differently this time. Sharper. Like it snapped everything into focus. I didn't have some perfect plan. No grand gesture lined up in my head. I just knew one thing. If I stayed in that cabin, standing there trying to explain myself, I'd lose him. Because he didn't need explanations. He needed clarity. And clarity doesn't come from talking in circles. I drove for maybe 20 minutes. No destination. Just movement. Letting my thoughts catch up with me for the first time since this trip started. Daniel. The timing. The fact that, I hadn't handled that part cleanly. And Benjamin saw that. Of course he did. He wasn't stupid. But what he didn't see, what I hadn't shown him, was that none of that mattered the second this became real. Not in the way he thought. I pulled over eventually. Sat there for a minute, hands on the wheel, staring ahead. Then I grabbed my phone. Scrolled. Stopped. That was it. By the time I got back to the cabin, the tension was still there. I could feel it before I even opened the door. Benjamin was standing by the window again. Same spot as before. Like he hadn't moved much since I left. He turned the second he heard the door. What the hell was that? He asked. Not yelling, but definitely not calm either. You just leave in the middle of that and what? I'm supposed to just stand here and… I ended it, I said. He stopped. What? I held up my phone. I ended it. For real this time. No loose ends. He stared at me, not taking it immediately. Robert, I should have done it cleaner before, I continued. You were right. That seemed to throw him off more than anything. Because I wasn't arguing. I wasn't deflecting. I was just owning it. I didn't think it mattered, I added. But it does. To you. So it does. Silence. Benjamin looked at the phone, then back at me. You left to do that? He asked. Yeah. His expression shifted again. Not anger this time. Something else. You could have just told me, he said. I could have, I agreed. But you didn't. No. Another pause. Then, quieter. Why? I stepped closer. Because telling you wasn't enough. That landed. I saw it. He didn't respond right away. Just stood there processing. You actually, he started, then stopped, shaking his head slightly. You actually went and fixed it. Yeah. For me. I didn't hesitate. For us. That changed something. I could feel it. Not instantly, but it cracked through that wall he'd put up. Benjamin looked down for a second, exhaling slowly, then back up at me. You're serious about this, he said. It wasn't a question. Yeah. Like, actually serious. Yeah. Another pause. Then he let out a quiet laugh, running a hand through his hair again. You're insane, you know that? He muttered. Probably. But you drove off mid-argument just to, he gestured vaguely, prove a point. I didn't do it for the point. He looked at me. I did it because you were right. That hit harder than anything else. The tension shifted. Not gone, but softer now. More grounded. Benjamin stepped closer. Not all the way, but enough. You really don't do things halfway, do you? He said quietly. Not when it matters. He studied me again. Longer this time, like he was trying to decide something. Then, okay, he said, just that. But it carried weight. I stepped closer too. Slow, matching his pace. No more halfway, I said. He nodded. No more halfway. For a second, we just stood there again. But this time, it felt different. Not tense. Not uncertain. Just steady. Benjamin's hand brushed against mine. Not accidental. He didn't pull away. Neither did I. Next time, he said quietly. Just be straight with me from the start. I will. Promise. I held his gaze. Yeah. He nodded once. Then, finally, that distance between us disappeared again. But this time, there was no hesitation left at all. After that, everything felt different. Not intense in the same way as before. Not that sharp, building tension that kept pulling us closer. Settled. Into something real. We didn't talk about it right away. Not again. There wasn't anything left to prove, at least not in that moment. Benjamin stayed close, his hand still loosely wrapped around mine like he didn't feel the need to question it anymore. And for the first time since this trip started, neither did I. We spent the rest of the day outside, walking the same trail as before, but now there was no hesitation in the way we moved around each other. No second-guessing when our shoulders brushed, no pretending not to notice. At one point, he just reached for my hand. Not subtle, not accidental, just simple. I looked at him. He didn't look back right away, just kept walking, like it wasn't a big deal. But I saw the small smile. And yeah, that hit more than anything else so far. That evening felt lighter. We cooked together, laughed more, talked about things that had nothing to do with us for once. But underneath it, there was something steady, like we'd crossed the hard part already. Like whatever came next, we'd handle it. Together. Later that night, we ended up back in the same spot. Same bed. Same quiet. But it didn't feel uncertain anymore. Benjamin was lying on his back, one arm behind his head, staring up at the ceiling. You know, he said after a while, this is not how I thought this weekend would go. I smirked slightly. Yeah, he said. I thought we'd just hang out, reset, go back to normal. And now, he turned his head toward me. There is no normal after this. He wasn't wrong. Is that a problem? I asked. He studied me for a second, then shook his head. No, he said. Not if we don't let it be. That was the first time he said something like that. Not cautious, not questioning, certain. I shifted slightly closer, resting back beside him. So what happens when we go back? I asked. He let out a quiet breath. We figure it out. Work. We'll deal with it. That simple? He glanced at me, a faint smile on his lips. No, he admitted. But worth it. That word stayed with me. Worth it. There was a pause. Then he added, quieter, "You're worth it." That, yeah, that landed deeper than anything else. I didn't joke, didn't deflect, just looked at him. "Same goes for you," I said, and I meant it. The next morning came easier. No tension, no second guessing, just normal in a new way. We packed up slowly, neither of us rushing to leave, but neither of us avoiding it either. Because the truth was, this wasn't just something that belonged to that cabin anymore. It didn't stay there. When we got back to the city, everything looked the same. Same streets, same buildings, same routine waiting for us. But inside the car, felt different. Benjamin glanced at me as we stopped at a red light. "So," he said, "Monday's gonna be interesting." I huffed a quiet laugh. "Yeah, it is." "You nervous?" "A little." "Same." Another pause. Then, "But I'm not backing out," he added. I looked at him. "Good," I said, "because I'm not either." The light turned green. We drove on. And for once, I wasn't thinking about how it might end. Because I already knew. This time, I wasn't inviting him somewhere knowing how it would end. I was choosing something without knowing exactly where it would go. And somehow, that felt even better.